I would still be able to use the best tool I have, which is my listening.
Yeah.
And and I think, the times that I have worked in post, I've actually had some judgment calls and done some things that even the veteran, Being There is the one movie that I actually got to do the production sound and follow it all the way through post.
Right. Okay.
Complete with a week or so into the post production, the re-recording process. I'm only orienting my words because I'm not sure how familiar you are with all the things that happen in post on a feature film. But I guess
yeah.
But Hal Ashby, who was the director of Being There, who already had tremendous faith in my abilities and my creativity because I'd done the movies with him in production. He wanted to fire the re-recording mixer. Okay.
Right.
The guy that he wanted to fire was the chief re-recording mixer at Goldwyn Studios, who really was not doing a very good job because at the same time he was mixing Being There, he was mixing like 3 other movies, and he was really like sort of burnt out. He was not giving our movie the attention. He was making a lot of mistakes. He was doing things, and Hal came to me one day and says, "I want to get rid of the guy." I said, "Hal, you cannot get rid of the guy." And but so Hal said to me, he says, "Well, can you be there every day and make sure that we're doing the good stuff?" He says, whether you put your hands on the board or not, he said, that's, he says, I realize that would be a touchy thing as well. So what happened is I did sit down there and I was right there with the re-recording mixer and making suggestions as they were doing their thing. And at some point, the re-recording mixer realized, boy, this is my way out. He said, if Hal's willing to have Jeff sitting here being on the board and all, I can go off and I can, do reels 3 through 5 on this other movie that I'm mixing at the same time I'm trying to mix this one. So he saw it as a way out. So he very graciously said, well, Jeff, if you think you've got the hang of it and all, and Hal seems to think you know what you're doing and all, he said, I'll step away and you can work on reel 4 and see how you're doing. And so I ended up being able to mix quite a lot of it. I didn't do the whole movie, but it was, I really learned a lot. I learned that I could use my knowledge of how things should sound with the picture and actually make things better. My production sound was already pretty good, but there's all sorts of things you can do to just make everything better, to smooth things out, to judiciously add in those backgrounds that just make things flow or add things to the scene. I discovered a lot of the ways in which you can get rid of those things that are offending in the background. I remember making multiple passes where we were trying to get out some crickets, something which now is pretty much done by sound editorial and it's done in Pro Tools, or using Isotope or something like that. A lot of that cleanup was actually done during dialogue pre-dubs by the re-recording mixer, by the dialogue mixer. They weren't done in the editing room. So I learned about, at that time, it was when the Dolby product, the Cat 42, was coming in, which was basically a selective frequency ducker, sort of like the way Cedar stuff works, but this was way before Cedar even existed. And it was right on the dub stage, and you could dial in stuff and play with it. And we found this amazing place where we got rid of a lot of crickets, crickets that actually couldn't have been, were not cut out by the sound editor. They were actually there and they were riding on the dialogue, and it left the voices sounding really good. And I thought, this is amazing. I actually fixed it in the mix. The thing that a lot of production people always say if things are all screwed up, I say, well, they can fix it in the mix, but now I knew you really could fix it in the mix. So it was really a good learning experience for me.
I found it really beneficial because I've done some stuff where, well, it kind of got to the point where, like, early on I was thinking I would get more into kind of the sound design post stage of things, but it
Right.
turned out that more often than not, the stuff that I was getting, I was solving other people's problems essentially, and that wasn't too fun. But now I've come kind of full circle, so I mainly do like location sound, but then I then step into kind of just more of a, I guess, supervising sound editor in a way.
Good to keep your hand in it, you know.
Of a little team, and just being able to see all the way through and speak to a dialogue editor about
it helps to
sounds.
close this gap that we've been talking about
exactly.
early on, which also is one of the reasons why I really love everything that CAS is doing, because you know, that is one of the main goals of the Cinema Audio Society, is to make sure that all of the people involved in, you know, in the soundtrack are talking to each other, you know, so you don't feel like the person in, you know, the sound editor is you know, you got to know that you're a team, and the team doesn't end when you turn in your dailies. That's when the collaboration begins. And it's not just getting all the frame rates right. It's not just giving them all the clean ISOs. It's not, you know, it's a whole lot of other things that really require everyone, even though I hate the phrase, being on the same page and understanding the goals and also the value of the soundtrack for any project, you know, because to a certain extent, dialogue has been marginalized. And this is some of the stuff that we're going to talk about on Saturday, I hope. It's been marginalized to the extent that it's been reduced to, as long as I can hear the words, we're okay on the dialogue. Now we'll get into all the rest of the stuff that's exciting, the sound design, all these exotic backgrounds, you know, spaceship, the sound of a door slamming, or the spaceship, or, you know, what does it sound like when they're in that factory? Well, actually, I've got all of these sounds of African animals, and I can slow them down and then repitch them, and it'll sound like that machinery has a life of its own. I'm not faulting any of that stuff, and I think it's important, but they're given the freedom and even the responsibility from a producer and a director and the filmmakers to do all that stuff to the soundtrack, because we've got the dialogue, it's all working. They cleaned it up. The production dialogue was, you know, so-so, but, you know, we've got these amazing tools. We've cleaned it up. But in cleaning all that up, there's still something that's being lost. You know, the sound, the real sound of that performance when it's properly recorded. But even the definition of properly recorded has changed. So you can't even use that phrase to apply to it. There's something that's lost, and it was something that I fell in love with early on. I always tell the story that, like, my goal, I would love to go to dailies and listen to just my tracks, raw, nothing done to them. You know, transferred to mag. That's the only thing that happened, off the 1/4 inch to mag. Played back in the daily screening room. I would like to close my eyes and be able to know something about those characters and what's going on in that scene just by listening to their voices. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to close your eyes and listen to the raw dialogue on your basic episodic TV show and know anything more about those characters except that they're talking and I can hear what they're saying, and hopefully understand the words. But that sort of knowledge you can get that from a silent movie, where the dialogue is a title card and you can read it, because it's lost so much of the dimension that hearing it can give you when it's properly recorded. You know, and I understand why it's recorded the way it is. I understand why the production sound mixer has to do what he has to do, but just in my heart, I feel like something has been lost. And it hurts me a little bit.